a time to be bold.
It comes from China.
Coronavirus pandemic alert, UK and Italy hit.
A time of disruption in the life of our country.
We will beat the coronavirus, and we will beat it together.
Through the radio, we can all talk to each other and maybe help each other out.
I want to thank Isle of Wight radio listeners for how much they've engaged with this.
It is time to join the nation to clap for our carers.
It's a bit mad, man. Like, you have up days, down days, all of the in-between. Of course, you know that you can rely on us. National treasure, Colonel Tom Moore. Good morning, Colonel Tom.
Good morning, Dave.
It's Harry Styles, everyone.
Yeah.
Hello. Harry, where in the world are you, mate?
I'm actually in California.
You're self-isolating over there.
I got stuck.
The world's biggest radio rave, Kiss Fest.
Will you be cutting your own hair, First Minister?
I'm not letting Peter anywhere near my hair.
The dog is literally eating through her wires.
Take your right hand, take your left hand, sprinkle on some water when you do the hand dance.
Some musical inspiration during the lockdown.
You are a key worker, your girlfriend is a key worker. I'm opening number 10.
Oh, make me a millionaire!
Tommy!
Absolute Radio 40.
I'm Professor Green, bringing you help and advice during the coronavirus pandemic.
60-second support.
If you're struggling, it's important to talk about it.
So right now, let's join together across the UK and reach out to someone.
Welcome to Tuning In Retail. Thanks for joining us for a packed hour where we'll be hearing from a wide range of speakers, with sessions from Chairman of the Marketing Society and former Customer Director of John Lewis, Craig Inglis, Hits Breakfast presenter Fleur East, in conversation with Paul Gerard, Global's Creative Director Jo McCrostie, and Radiocentre's Siobhan Kenny, Mark Barber, Judith Spilsbury, and Camilla Camara. But our first session is from Lucy Barrett. As Radiocentre's client director, Lucy champions the value and impact of commercial radio amongst advertisers and agencies. Her mission is to help advertisers see radio differently. Today, Lucy will provide an overview of the radio industry.
Good morning, my name's Lucy Barrett and I'm the client director here at Radiocentre. A very warm welcome to Tuning In Retail. So retail is a really important sector for commercial radio. Its combined ad revenue makes it the fifth biggest sector to advertise on our airwaves. Now, you're probably going to hear quite a lot about return on investment over the next hour. And I certainly know my colleague Mark Barber is going to talk about profit ROI and how radio advertising stacks up against other mediums for retail. But I can tell you now that revenue ROI is probably our most successful category. And on average, for every £1 you spend, you get nearly £19 back. So before I hand you over to the former customer director of John Lewis, Craig Inglis, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the audio market, where radio fits in, some current listening figures, and a little bit of Radiocentre research just to set up the morning for you. So the audio market is in a really interesting place at the moment, from podcast to streaming to voice-activated speakers. It seems that everyone is talking about audio. But what differentiates radio from all the rest of audio is the intimate relationship that people have with it. So this is probably why 90% or nearly 90% of the adult population tune into radio every week. And 36 million of them are commercial radio listeners, and they listen for an average of 13 hours every week. When people talk about disruption over the last 10 years, the medium that always comes to mind is social media. And how does radio compare now that there's a lot more social media? Well, people spend a lot longer with their radio than they do with social media. And this probably, well, actually has lots of reasons why people listen to radio, none of which I don't have enough time this morning to tell you many of the reasons why, but I don't think we can talk about trust enough. Now, every year, the European Commission do something called the European Barometer Survey, the Eurobarometer Survey, and radio came out top this year as the most trusted medium across Europe. But it's not just this year, it's over the last decade. Every year, radio has come out top. Now, if I was to look at the overall market, for the time being, I've just taken out radio so we can have a look at what's happening in the rest of audio. The bars in front of you, you'll see that the top two, the grey and the green, are what we call owned music. So that's digital tracks such as iTunes or CDs and vinyl. And then podcasts is in the black, and then the yellow is on-demand streaming services. And you will see over the last few years that bit by bit, the streaming services and podcasts are squeezing the owned music. Now, this suggests to most of us that we're happy to not own our music, to stream our music. But what happens when I put radio back into the audio landscape? Well, you'll see that that's remained very steady. So we are not losing share to streaming. We're actually dominating in that area across the landscape, and we have 75% of total listening weekly. The other thing we get asked about all the time is younger listeners. So apparently they aren't listening. They prefer to stream their music, so they listen to podcasts. They don't want their music curated by somebody else, and they're not really interested in news or politics, or current affairs, or any of those things. Well, as this chart demonstrates, commercial audience for younger listeners seems to be mostly on radio, 66% reach. And that compares to 17% for podcasts, 20% for podcasts and around 17% for commercial streaming services. So that's the streaming services that carry advertising. Now, I'm going to go back or just forward to commercial radio listening during lockdown. So we did some research among commercial radio listeners to talk about their listening habits. And 38% of commercial radio listeners increased their listening during lockdown. 45% of them were the newly working from home. So 45% of commercial radio listeners who were newly working from home said they increased their listening. So that's people like you and me who were used to going to the office every day, who suddenly found themselves either working at the kitchen table or in the spare bedroom, and sort of missed being in the office, and put it on for company, for the serendipity of hearing a song you hadn't heard in a while, for the and radio is a terrific friend. And actually the same can be said. So 43% of the increase came from newly at home people, so people who weren't working but found themselves at home through maybe being furloughed or just purely because they couldn't go out and about like they used to be. And our key workers made up another 32%, so they increased their 32% of them increased their listening. So that's the people that kept the country going, the hospital workers, the delivery drivers, the supermarket drivers. They obviously found a great way of connecting them with the rest of the country was listening to radio. And this was backed up through research from Global and Bauer. Now, they discovered through streaming that they can look at the numbers directly, that they had a surge of listening of around 15% at lockdown. And actually, as things have progressed and we are going out more, those figures are around now at 10% versus pre-lockdown. So they're still enjoying a huge increase in listening. And when we talk about the phase of this current pandemic, we talk about the shock, the bounce back and recovery of what we think is going to happen to the economy. So a little bit like a traffic light, the red, the shock, was when we were told we couldn't leave the house. So this is at the end of March when we could only leave the house for 1 hour a day just to exercise. Our children were sent home from school. It was a pretty grim time. And every week since then, some of the restrictions have started to being lifted. And we're seeing normality return. And what we're predicting is that we're now in what's called the bounce back phase, and it probably will be quite brief before there is maybe a recession. But I'm not an economist and I'm not a futurist, so I can't tell you what's going to happen. But we definitely feel like we are now in the bounce back phase. So we always look at this, where we've been monitoring this YouGov weekly mood tracker of the nation. And having a look at how people's moods are changing. Now, happiness in the last week has jumped up above frustration and boredom and stress, showing that people are beginning to embrace the new the laws being slightly lifted, the restrictions being lifted, and that perhaps it feels like this relaxation is going to unlock some pent-up consumer demand. So we had a look at this consumer demand for some research we did called Bounce Back and Beyond. Now, this is available on our website if you'd like to have a look at it in more detail. But it explored this the pent-up demand, and unsurprisingly, a lot of the social activities were listed as things that people were most looking forward to spending their money on once normality returned. And that's probably because they were the most things that were most impacted by lockdown. But actually, when it comes to whether they'll be spending more or less money versus pre-lockdown, then the pattern changes. So despite restaurants, bars and clubs and international travel scoring very highly as categories that people were really excited to spend money on, just looking at this, the dominance of domestic travel and other retail suggests that there's going to be a bit more pragmatic about where they spend their money now that they're coming out of lockdown. But the good news is that our research also highlighted the important role that radio advertising can play on influencing these decisions. So just bearing in mind that most people say they aren't at all influenced in any way by advertising, these scores are very impressive that you can see now. So to summarise, we've now moved into a brief bounce back phase where people are enjoying the opportunity to unleash their pent-up demand, to do some of the things that they've been missing. And we're going to spend the rest of the morning showing you how the important role that radio can play in helping them spend their money. So I'll be back at the end to say goodbye, but I'm handing you over to Craig now. Thank you.
You can get involved in today's event by posting your questions using the hashtag #TuningIn or tweeting @Radiocentre. On the way, we have sessions from Global's Creative Director Jo McCrostie and Radiocentre's Planning Director Mark Barber. But our next session is from marketing legend Craig Inglis. As former customer director at John Lewis, Craig spent 12 years developing the retailer's emotional brand positioning. The campaigns became a key part of the festive calendar and won awards around the world. In 2018, Craig led the rebrand of both John Lewis partnership brands, putting the business's admired staff at the heart of the customer proposition. Craig is also the non-executive chairman of the Marketing Society.
Hi everyone, I'm Craig Inglis. It's great to be here. Welcome to my kitchen, and a quick intro from me. Until very recently I was customer director at John Lewis. I was there for about 12 years or so, and I led johnlewis.com and all of the digital channels, as well as customer experience, marketing and communications. I'm also chairman of the Marketing Society, and I've been doing that for a couple of years. Apart from that, I've got 4 kids aged from 1 to 18, so they keep me very busy indeed. So I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so just giving you my thoughts on how retailers have been affected by the coronavirus pandemic, how brands have responded, and really what it all means for the future in terms of the challenges that brands will face, and perhaps more importantly, the opportunities that might exist in the future. A very quick caveat though, these are tumultuous, unpredictable times, and I don't have a crystal ball. So I don't have all the answers, but I do hope to give you some food for thought. Okay, so I want to start by just reflecting quickly on the impact of the pandemic on the retail sector. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, as I suspect you're only too aware of the impact, but it's so significant that it deserves dwelling on just a little. So I've got a few quick charts here that I think help bring it all to life. Now, this first chart shows only too starkly the impact on retail sales, and the saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words couldn't be more appropriate here. Now, as you can see, retail sales dropped dramatically from February this year by 13% in the 3 months to May, the lowest since records began. On the next chart, you can see there were some signs of a partial bounce back in May with a 12% uptick as some shops started to reopen. But as you can see, sales don't recover fully from the huge falls seen in March and April. In terms of other key trends, we saw a huge swing to digital channels during this same period. Something that, of course, was already happening before the pandemic struck. But over the last 3 months, we've seen growth of 24% versus last year. And there are no signs of that abating, with May 21% up on April. And both stats are the highest on record. So, and as you can see from the final slide, that movement has been happening across all retail sectors. In fact, online sales as a proportion of all retail reached a record high of 33% in May, and that beat the previous record of 31%, which was set in April. In terms of the rest of the year, the forecasts, of course, vary, but organisations like PwC are currently projecting our GDP to decline by 5 to 10% compared to last year. And that's significantly worse than the contraction that we saw during the 2008 financial crisis. So whilst it's an overused word, the numbers tell us that these really have been unprecedented times in retail. And that's a pretty grim picture for an industry that was already facing significant structural change. So there will of course be some casualties, and indeed sadly there have been some just in recent days. But like all crises, there are others who will find the opportunities and seize them. And I think the clues for how to grasp those opportunities lie with the most important people in all of this, our customers. Now, whilst this is on a much bigger scale, there are clues from previous crises like the financial crash or from 9/11. In those moments, the anchor points that consumers have are savagely taken away, and that can cause them to reel. Everything that was the norm is no longer the norm, and that can be incredibly unsettling for consumers. It directly challenges beliefs about who they can trust. You just think about when people queued around the block to remove their life savings from what were the much trusted banks and put it under the mattress instead. None of us would have previously believed that that was possible. Now, this crisis is just like that, but magnified many, many times over. So what does that mean for consumers and brands in retail? Well, I believe that whilst confidence is low, consumers will still want to buy. And what I saw in 2008 when I just joined John Lewis, I think will be repeated in that consumers will become more demanding, they become more discerning, and more considerate about what they buy and who they buy it from. In other words, they still want to buy, but they want to buy well. To add to that, as you can see from this chart from PricewaterhouseCoopers, some of the changed behaviours that we all experienced as a consequence of lockdown look likely to stick. Things like making do and mending, signing up to subscriptions for our essentials, buying from brands who look after their people, or just doing lots more of everything online, including shopping. Now that obviously has implications for retail brands, both for the short and for the longer term. So taking the short term first, the behaviour of brands today is incredibly important to their success tomorrow. And that's both in terms of what they say and most importantly, what they do. So let's take each of those in turn. Now, in terms of what they do, consumers will get behind brands that do the right thing by them, by their employees, and by the broader communities that they are part of. There's been lots of examples of this over the last few months, with some brands focused on feeding the nation, or on converting their operations to make PPE or ventilators, focused on protecting jobs, or on just giving more to their communities. The important thing is that just can't be a flash in the pan. It's got to be built on and become part of the way that brands consistently behave if they want to succeed. In terms of what they say, rather than just talking at them, consumers will support the brands, I think, that genuinely connect with them honestly, authentically, and with humanity and warmth. In other words, on an emotional rather than a functional level. Now, again, I've seen many more examples of this over the last few months, and you shouldn't be fooled into thinking, though, that telling stories in this way is in some way self-indulgent when sales are in decline and business resources are under duress, because quite the opposite is true. And I'm sure many of you in the audience know this, but there's a long history of evidence over many, many decades now that demonstrates that investing in brand building marketing during a recession will not only drive commercial benefit in the short term, it will also ensure that you come out the other side much stronger with sales and share gains whilst others stumble. And if that isn't enough, at maybe a more basic level, just look at the incredible value that advertising offers right now. Despite the evidence I've just mentioned, many brands have paused campaigns over the last few months, and as a result, prices across most media channels have fallen in line with that. At the same time, we're all consuming more media, we're at home more, so audiences have increased for almost all channels. Radio channels are reporting double-digit audience growth. TV viewership's up and news media consumption is reaching record levels. And this combination of lower prices and greater reach means that there's just great value to be had out there. And the brands that choose to invest in marketing at this time will see significant increases in their share of voice that will drive up their ROIs and ultimately market share. But beyond the numbers, on a much more human level, I would argue that if you create brilliant, resonant, emotionally impactful campaigns at this time, then they are likely to be more effective than ever. Because not only are we more likely to listen because we're consuming more media, but the pandemic has been a massive jolt to the system. It's an inflection point which has caused us all to step back and be more thoughtful about what really matters in our lives. And I have no doubt that the brands that can connect with that sentiment and do so authentically will reap the benefits, both in the short and the long term. Now, talking of the long term and thinking maybe more broadly about what this all means for retailers, this is an inflection point for businesses too. The pandemic, I think, gives leaders a rare opportunity to step back and reflect on what it is that their business is really about, what makes it different, what it stands for, and a chance to really rethink the business that we are, if you like, and to grab new opportunities. It's also an opportunity to take the tough decisions that perhaps you've been putting in the too difficult pile and embrace the trends we were already seeing, but that have been accelerated by the coronavirus. And this slide here shows the 6 things that I think retailers should be giving most thought to ensure that businesses are successful for the long term. So starting with digital. This, to my mind, is by far and away the most important. And the question to ask yourself is, are you truly embracing the opportunity offered by digital? And if not, what will it take to do so? All retailers should really have been addressing this question many years ago, but the reality is many haven't, despite the relentless growth we've seen over the last decade. And as we saw earlier, the pandemic has turbocharged that trend to the point it's no longer a question of how or when, it's a question of survival or not. It's a huge opportunity, of course, to open up new channels of growth, but it requires a re-engineering of every part of your business to succeed. And now's the time to embrace that fully. Reinvention. If your historic market is maturing, competition's intensifying, or the margins just aren't there anymore, now's the time to take the steps to reinvent your business. That means giving yourself the space and time to think strategically, but it also means creating a culture where innovation and creativity thrive. Doing that successfully means being prepared to rethink and potentially restructure your business. It means embracing agile working, creating new capabilities, and changing how you harness your best talent to embed a culture of innovation and creativity. Now, in my experience, this is really hard yards to land, but it's likely to be essential for many retailers over the coming months. Just carrying on doing what you do today is unlikely to drive future success, I'm afraid. Sustainability. Tackling the challenges and harnessing the opportunities offered by sustainability is huge, and lockdown has caused us all to change our habits, particularly around travel and consumption of goods, and the environment has benefited from that. The question for retailers is, what opportunity does this offer for the longer term? This was already a growing consumer trend, and it's only likely to accelerate after the virus. I have no doubt that the retailers that are able to meet that need with creative, authentic propositions that allow customers to have great products, but which minimise the impact on the planet, will achieve great commercial success. Right sizing. Retailers should use this moment to think really carefully about the optimum shape of their business. This is partly about taking tough cost decisions, of course, but not in a blunt way, simply to improve short-term profitability. Rather, this is about thinking deeply about what is no longer needed in your business, removing those costs and investing in the capabilities that you need and the customer propositions that you want to create. For many traditional retailers, that will include a difficult conversation about reducing the amount of physical space that they have and diverting investment into their digital operations and into reimagining the shops they decide to keep. Moving to collaboration now. When facing the scale of challenge that we now are, the brands that succeed, I think, will be prepared to think much more creatively about who they partner with in order to deliver their propositions. Now, that could be in terms of securing a more flexible, more robust supply chain. It could be in creating new routes to market. It could be product collaborations that take the best of two brands, or creating more imaginative customer propositions and experiences. But whatever it is, retailers should shake off any of the taboos of the past and just be prepared to work together to deliver mutual benefit. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, brand purpose. This last few months has seen an acceleration in a trend that, again, was already happening, where consumers will actively choose brands that have a purpose beyond just making money. According to PwC, in the last few months, 1 in 5 of us have bought more from brands supporting the NHS or the vulnerable, with almost the same again buying more from brands that look after their employees. And that shouldn't just be forgotten now we're starting to come out of lockdown. It's an opportunity for retailers to build on the good work they've done, to reinforce what they stand for, and to create a differentiated proposition that resonates with their customers and builds their advocacy and loyalty. But a word of warning, this isn't about advertising or simply just creating a veneer on top. It's about building something that means something to customers and employees, that's rooted in a truth about your business. And to do that, it's got to run deep and touch every part of what you do. So to wrap up then, there's no doubt that what we've all been living through has been an incredibly difficult time, and that retailers who were already being hard hit by a huge structural change in the industry have been disproportionately impacted. However, they are also extraordinary times, and that's given retailers a rare and perhaps much needed opportunity to step away from the relentlessness of the day-to-day, to think carefully about who they are, what matters to their customers, and what business they could be in the future. Now, there's not only something quite cathartic about that, but it's also an exciting opportunity to create your next successful chapter. So thanks for listening. I hope it was helpful. All the very, very best, and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Still to come, we'll be hearing from music artist and breakfast radio presenter Fleur East. And Judith Spilsbury will explore how targeting people at relevant times helps turbocharge ad effectiveness. Before that, our next session comes from Radiocentre's planning director, Mark Barber, who's responsible for developing the industry body's award-winning research. Over the years, Radiocentre has amassed a bank of insight into the impact of radio advertising for brands. Today, Mark will take us through the research that demonstrates how radio can play a vital role in driving business for retail companies when times are tough.
Good morning, everyone. With recession looming over the economy, at least until the middle of next year, this presentation explores how radio can help retail companies navigate the challenges that lie in store, increase market share, and get products flying off the shelves, be they real or virtual. Assuming everyone is sold on that, I'll move on. Now, I'm sure many of you have already seen one or more of the many numerous press articles, blogs, or presentations doing the rounds that highlight the importance of continuing to advertise during a recession. Taking it a stage further, Marketing Week columnist Mark Ritson concludes that recessions are as much an opportunity as they are a threat, and believes that the best marketers will be upping, not cutting, their budgets. Why is this? Well, recessions create unique conditions that allow smart marketers to disrupt category norms and drive brand growth faster than during normal times. One reason for this is that many brands reduce advertising spend when times are tough, opening the door for competitors to grow market share at their expense. This is because the key behind market share growth at any time is something called excess share of voice, achieved by spending proportionately more on advertising media than your share of market. The opposite is also true, by the way. If you spend proportionately less than your share of market, your market share declines. IPA analysis demonstrates that if a brand spends consistently ahead of their market position over time, then market share grows to match their share of spend. And when your competitors are spending less, it's much easier to boost your excess share of voice. On top of this, recent analysis of the IPA databank by marketing consultant Peter Field reveals how excess share of voice effects are multiplied in a recession. As you can see from this chart, which compares market share growth at different excess share of voice, or ESOV levels, during the 08-09 recession compared to the 2 years either side. Now, the column on the right shows that brands that achieved excess share of voice of over 8% on average experienced market share growth 67% greater than they would have done during normal times. That's why recessions offer such great opportunity for growing market share. So, how can radio help retailers in this context? Well, firstly, for many categories, a budget spent on radio buys a much higher share of voice within the medium than it does on other media. For example, this chart highlights how a retail advertiser spending £1 million on radio in Q3 last year would have achieved a 4% share of voice on radio. That's 60% higher than it would buy in online display and over 6 times the share it would afford on TV, the two most commonly used media by advertisers in this category. And there's further data from the IPA which highlights the role that radio can play in boosting market share growth. This chart shows the efficiency of campaigns that feature radio in converting excess share of voice into annual market share growth compared to campaigns that don't use the medium. Now, as an illustration of what this means, a 10% excess share of voice on a campaign that includes radio converts into 0.8 percentage points of annual market share growth, compared to only 0.2 percentage points for campaigns that don't feature radio. Summarised more succinctly, this means that if you're using radio as part of your media mix, you'll grow market share 4 times faster than if you're not. Now, beyond excess share of voice benefits, there's another reason why this particular recession offers even greater opportunities for advertisers to disrupt their category. People's brand purchase habits are deeply ingrained and difficult to shift. However, research from behavioural expert Richard Shotton shows that people who experience significant life events, such as marriage, divorce, moving house, or changing job, are 2.5 times more likely to try a new brand compared to those who haven't. Well, how is this relevant? Well, lockdown has radically disrupted everybody's lives as much, if not more than, these more typical life events. And as it is relaxed, this research suggests the scale of brand switching will be widespread. The main implication being that your customers are more likely to switch to your competitors, and your competitors' customers are more likely to switch to you. So it's vital to land on the right side of this equation. How can radio help ensure that you do? Well, firstly, and very simply, radio offers advertisers the best value for money audience delivery. For every £1 you spend on radio, you'll be buying at least twice as much audience as you will in any other medium. Or, for example, up to 15 times as much in the case of online video. Now, that's a pretty big head start when you're looking to exert influence as widely as possible with your media plan. Beyond efficiency of audience delivery, radio is proven to boost advertising effects for retail brands when used as part of a wider media mix. Analysis of results from 87 retail campaigns measured on Radio Gauge highlights how radio significantly boosts overall campaign cut-through across a range of metrics, including ad awareness, brand relevance, and brand consideration. Now, which retail advertiser wouldn't like awareness of their campaign to be 38% higher? Now, from a more tactical perspective, radio offers retail advertisers a unique opportunity to speak to shoppers on their way to the store. IPA Touchpoints data shows that live radio reaches 38% of people in the moment travelling by car to buy groceries, for example. That's 13 times greater than the reach of the next largest editorial medium. This means that radio presents retail advertisers with a unique opportunity to intervene and exert last-minute influence on buyers to sway their decision-making as they enter the store. And the data in this chart shows how radio advertising heard in this context exerts a powerful effect on purchase consideration in the store environment, increasing overall intention to purchase by a third. Interestingly, this uplift effect is equally potent among those who currently feature the test brands in their purchasing repertoire and those that don't. This suggests that exposure to radio advertising just prior to the shopping occasion can encourage brand switching as well as reinforce existing brand loyalty. Radio is also a highly responsive medium, perfect for when you need to deliver fast results online. For online retail companies aiming to drive people to their website, this chart shows how interaction with brands online is on average 52% higher among people exposed to radio ads compared to those who aren't, with the best performing campaign experiencing a 163% uplift in brand browsing. These effects are immediate too. Over half of all browsing stimulated by radio takes place within 24 hours of exposure to the ads. But most crucially for retail advertisers marketing in a recession, as a result of all of these other effects, radio really delivers on the bottom line. As we can see in this chart, radio delivers higher ROI for retail brands than any other medium, paying back £3 profit for every £1 spent. And this ROI efficiency of radio means that it can also have a powerful effect on overall campaign returns for retail brands. As this analysis conducted on Radiocentre's campaign ROI calculator demonstrates, total campaign returns are 8% higher when radio is allocated 20% of a £10 million retail budget compared to when it is not used at all. Now that may not sound like a lot, but based on this data, that's an extra £5.5 million of revenue added to the bottom line purely as a result of moving money from other media into radio. So, to summarise this brief tour of travel-related radio effectiveness research, firstly, think about how incorporating radio into your campaign can help drive share of voice for your brand and convert that into market share growth 4 times faster than if you're not using the medium. Secondly, with increased likelihood of brand switching over the next few months, consider how radio can help ensure that your brand gains more new users than it loses. When budgets are tight, you need to make sure that every advertising impression has an impact and elicits a positive outcome for your brand. The evidence we've reviewed shows how when used as part of a wider media mix, radio helps retail campaigns cut through more effectively and has an immediate effect on influencing behaviour, be that in terms of changing buying behaviour in store or driving people online. Finally, and most vitally when times are tough, radio is proven to boost the bottom line for retail companies. Allocating money to radio from other media can significantly improve revenue returns from a media campaign while remaining within the same budget. Taking all of these points into consideration, it's clear that incorporating radio into the mix can make a big difference in helping to get the tills ringing again. If you're interested in finding out more or would like some advice on how radio can play a role for your business, please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much for listening.
Over the last few months, Radiocentre has been working to assist the advertising industry to provide support during these highly challenging times. From new research studies to creative best practice, here's a look at the resources Radiocentre has made available. Over the last few months, Radiocentre has been working to assist its members and the advertising industry. to provide support during these highly challenging times. From negotiations with governing bodies, politicians and the public sector, to resources for sales teams and media agencies. Radiocentre's Coronavirus Hub is home to multiple tools and resources, including our Radio Bytes series, the latest news and best practice creative examples. Radiocentre also commissioned research agency DRG to explore how the coronavirus crisis has changed listening behaviour amongst commercial radio listeners. The study found that 38% of commercial radio listeners are listening to more radio than before lockdown, with audiences tuning in for an average of 26 hours a week, with 90% of listeners saying radio keeps them in touch with the outside world. We now welcome Radiocentre's CEO, Siobhan Kenny. Prior to joining Radiocentre, Siobhan played a key role in bringing the 2012 Olympics to London, along with positions at Number 10, Disney and HarperCollins. Today, she'll be discussing how radio has been a force for good.
Hello, my name's Siobhan Kenny and I'm the Chief Executive of Radiocentre. I know we've all had to learn new skills during this lockdown period, and my challenge is that I'd be much more comfortable doing this presentation walking around, so I'll have to let you be the judge of how much I've learnt a new skill at the end of this presentation. We wanted to look at the role of commercial radio during a crisis, and bearing in mind that crises don't come much bigger than the current pandemic that we find ourselves in. And our report is entitled Commercial Radio, a Force for Good. So I guess that gives you a little bit of a hint of what the findings were. So we know that people are listening to commercial radio for nearly 2 hours extra a day since we went into lockdown at the end of March. I guess there's an obvious desire to hear more news, and let's look a little bit under the surface of that. We discovered that there are 25% more news bulletins on commercial radio, and that on average they're running for 28% longer. This is interesting, bearing in mind that at this point, Ofcom have in fact relaxed some of their regulation about local news provision. But of course, commercial radio is responding to their listeners. It's also a very nimble medium, so we were able to broadcast from all sorts of interesting and fascinating places, as you've probably picked up. People were broadcasting from garden sheds, from airing cupboards, and basically listeners kind of entered into that as well, echoing their own experience, I guess. And here we find that 77% of people say that radio is the most trusted medium for news, closely followed by television, and then on a sliding scale, really, down to 15%. Only 15% of people who say they trust the news that they consume on social media. So in parenthesis, that's also an interesting point for government and regulators, since of that list, radio and television are pretty heavily regulated, and then we're on a sliding scale downwards. So there is a relationship there, which I think is interesting for us to ponder as a society, really. Now, of course, the attribute of people listening for longer and also trusting what they hear is not lost on the government. The simple message at the beginning was stay at home, save lives, was very consistent across all media. It's becoming more complicated now as we come out of lockdown, and the message has become slightly more nuanced and maybe even change from region to region. And again, radio is a perfect medium to be talking both to mass audiences, but also to different and harder to reach demographics. Again, a point that isn't lost on government. So we serve very diverse audiences. We score very well, as you see here, with BAME audiences and C2s, Ds and Es. So it's something to consider when you're planning campaigns. And if you're wanting to reach out to a broader audience, some of whom don't really consume much other news apart from what they hear on the radio, then, you know, there's a place there definitely should be a place for radio in your schedules. Of course, just being radio, being commercial radio, a big part of what we do is always focused around charity, around community support, about just being part of the local communities that we serve. We would be nothing without that. So even in a normal year, up to £30 million is raised every year for charitable causes, led, of course, by Global with Make Some Noise and by Bauer with Cash for Kids. But those efforts are replicated across the country as people have all sorts of inventive and often highly amusing ways of raising money for charity, as well as supporting other causes. And so during the pandemic, those efforts have been stepped up. Global and Bauer between them have raised well over £2 million for immediate support for victims of the pandemic and their families. And again, the report highlights how smaller companies, smaller stations across the country are replicating those initiatives. So here are a few examples of things that have gone on more than usual, business as usual, during these last few strange months. Obviously, we did the 3rd ever Mental Health Minute, 3rd year in a row. This year broadcast over 500 stations, including all of the BBC, all of commercial radio, community radio, hospital, prison. It really was a fantastic event and much needed, of course, during this time when people find themselves very constricted in their movements. And therefore, it's a good way to highlight that issue at present. Obviously, we were well behind the supporting key workers. Now here's our clap for carers, and of course Colonel Tom. It started off as Captain Tom and is now, of course, the fabulous Colonel Tom, and our own Young Audio Awards highlighting our talent for the future. So these are awards for under 18s. 2nd year we run them. One of our first events to be run, in fact, as a virtual event, and we had over 1,000 under 18s tuning into that. So we were really pleased to be nurturing the diversity of our industry, which is something that we're very passionate about at Radiocentre. So finally, I suppose we wanted to just search a bit more about the reasons that people are drawn to commercial radio, and this list kind of gives us a very good indicator of why people are listening for longer during this time. Keeps me in touch with the outside world, keeps me informed, keeps me company, makes me feel happy, and it delivers trusted news. So I don't know about you, but if someone used even only 2 or 3 of those descriptions about me as a person, I'd feel quite happy with that, I must say. And again, it's one of the reasons why we think that commercial radio is such a good environment for brands. It's trusted, it keeps people company, it makes them happy. So that's a good environment for your brand to be in. And of course, it is unblockable and unskippable. Your ads will be. So those are just some of the findings from our report, Commercial Radio, A Force for Good. Of course, you'll find the whole report on our website. And if you've got any further questions, you know where we are. We'd love to hear from you.
Time to welcome 2018's President of the Cannes Lion Jury for Audio, Global's Creative Director Jo McCrostie. Jo heads up Global's award-winning creative team, and today we'll discuss the speed and flexibility of radio, along with how to strike the right tone during these unusual times.
Good morning, hello. My name is Jo McCrostie and I'm Creative Director at Global. Thank you for joining me today for Tune In. Radio has often been a medium favoured for its flexibility, for its agility, for the speed with which you can go from brief to broadcast. And throughout this period of disruption, I think it has surpassed all expectations in its ability to do that. We were very quick to respond to the crisis, setting up remote studios and voiceover artists who are much more used to coming into our state-of-the-art Leicester Square studios, repurposed bedrooms, basements, bunk beds, sheds, garages, understair cupboards, even airing cupboards apparently. And with the help of as many duvets and pillows as they could find to muffle the sound, they created their own home studios. We've made over 1,000 ads in lockdown, but a key concern for advertisers is how to get the tone right. In our research, we saw that lockdown created a surge in 3 core media need states. These were information and explanation, reassurance and connection, and distraction and escape. So let's take a look at how advertisers have tapped into these need states. And to kick off with, I'm going to share with you as good an example as you can get of this, which is the communication from the government. Here's a montage of some of the messages that we've all heard, sped up a little because there's a lot of them. Have a listen.
This is a message from the government about coronavirus. If you or anyone in your household has a high temperature, do not leave home for at least 7 days. This is a vital update from the government about coronavirus. Coronavirus is a national emergency. Only leave your home for the following reasons. To exercise once a day. Don't go to the GP or hospital. Continue to wash your hands regularly. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise or to work. It's important we all help to protect older people. This is a message from the government to all essential workers. You're doing vital jobs to keep our country going, and you can now get tested for coronavirus. You must remain at home as much as possible.
Mark Strong. Smooth, warm, easy on the ear, but I think the nation will forever remember him as the voice giving us the government's message. And it's authoritative, it's direct, but it's also really clear and calm. So the government's clearly leading in this space, but supermarkets were also really quick to inform shoppers and get their messages out. And this research here from Veritonic, first aired at MediaTel's Future of Audio conference, which was right back in April, shows just how well these ads performed. Really well. Really, really well above industry benchmarks. So people wanted information. They wanted explanation. And banks were all quick to connect and reassure their customers. But there was one issue. They were all saying the same thing, and so all the messages sounded the same. How could any one brand stand out and take ownership of its message? Have a listen to this montage.
With our app and online banking, you can manage your money like you did before, and we're updating our website daily with helpful guides and the latest information on our services.
One of the most convenient ways to do this is to use internet banking. It's both safe and secure. You can check your balance, view your transactions, and move money between bank accounts.
Plus, we've more than doubled the size of our support team. So, if you bank with us and COVID-19 has affected your business, visit our website for more information.
Please be wary of text messages containing links. They may appear to be from legitimate senders like the government, a bank, or a delivery company, but never enter your online banking information or personal details after clicking on a link.
From contacting those who are most vulnerable to setting aside £8 billion of lending to support our UK business customers. Because you are not an island. You are part of something far, far bigger.
Now, I deliberately cut the brand names out of those banks, but can you identify any brand in that montage? Normally, this is where I'd ask for a show of hands, but because I can't see you, I put this to a panel of 2,377 people. And unprompted, there was one brand that really stood out. It was this one, HSBC. Respondents were able to correctly identify the HSBC ad over all the other competitors in that montage. And what's more, it exceeded category benchmarks for unprompted ad awareness. So even without the brand named in that montage, HSB stood out. And it's differentiated by its music, which was created by Jean-Michel Jarre and has been used since January of last year. So there's HSBC demonstrating a really effective use of brand music. But what about voice? Let's have another listen.
One day, social distancing will be a memory. Flattening curves will be done at the gym, and we'll all be experts in web chatting. Maybe. Until then, HSBC UK is here to help. From contacting those who are most vulnerable to setting aside £8 billion of lending to support our UK business customers.
Okay, you don't need to listen to all of it, but we wondered if we might be able to improve on the brand's connection with listeners if we re-recorded the voice. So same script, same voice, but with a real focus on delivering a much more human connection. This is what it sounded like.
One day, social distancing will be a memory. Flattening curves will be done at the gym, and we'll all be experts in web chatting. Maybe. Until then, HSBC UK is here to help. From contacting those who are most vulnerable to setting aside £8 billion of lending to support our UK business customers.
There's a big difference between addressing an audience and actually connecting with customers. The re-record showed a 19% uplift in relevance, a 10% uplift in likability, and a 7% uplift in authenticity. So this really reinforces the importance of casting and direction, even if the recording's being voiced in a broom cupboard. And now, turning to our final need state, distraction and escape. In times of disruption, when things are unfamiliar, we find comfort in what is familiar. And there's a great opportunity here for brand to remind us why we love them. So this is just an idea, something that we mocked up for one of the nation's favourite brands. We wanted to see if a bit of escape and distraction or light-hearted playfulness might have an impact on brand consideration throughout these uncertain times. Here's the mock-up.
Ni, yo, st, pa, st, the, wi, jib, tub, so, s, a, ma, no, I, a, f, yo, a, da, day. Yummy pasta with a tasty tomato sauce and one of your 5 a day.
With an anagram in every mouthful, Heinz Alphabetti Spaghetti is homeschooling in a tin.
Again, we tested this on our panel, and amongst a target audience of children in household, the ad was seen as significantly more memorable, enjoyable, and relevant. But what's more, we saw a significant uplift in brand consideration for Heinz, which went up to 65%, and a 205% uplift in product consideration. And as the nation's moods and attitudes shift, let's take a closer look at online retail. Lockdown destabilised us, and as Richard Shotton says, forced us to question our existing behaviours. eBay have really understood how people's needs have evolved over lockdown and made sure that their ads were relevant.
We're spending more time at home and more time gardening.
For the time being, working out at home is the only option.
We're spending even more time with our pets.
So arts and crafts kits are an absolute must.
With many of us having more time on our hands, we're reading more than ever. All this extra time at home has given us a great opportunity to declutter our homes, our winter wardrobe, and things we no longer need. So what are you waiting for? This summer, make it rain. Make money by selling on eBay. Just snap it, list it, sell it. eBay.
So, new behaviours. The challenge, I guess, for online retailers is to turn these behaviours into habits, to maintain new customers through shifting from a transactional and functional relationship into an emotional relationship nurtured through a brand preference. And as we emerge out of lockdown, online retailers need to advertise to reinforce the behaviour change and maintain and grow online sales. So whether you're an established e-com or a high street or challenger e-com, purchasing habits will continue to change. And to quote Richard Shotton again, now, more than ever, you should be advertising. Radio allows you to meet your customers' needs at the time your customers need their needs to be met. As we emerge out of lockdown, our moods and attitudes will continue to change, and it's radio's ability to address the needs of the nation in a tone that reflects the mood of the nation that has been driving success for our advertisers. As Siobhan Kenny says, these need states also help explain the continued resilience of radio listening across a decade of intensifying competition. So radio is tried and tested by our top spending advertisers, and it's now producing some extraordinary and unmatched successes for new advertisers. So radio is proving now more than ever to be an infallible medium. I'm out of time now, so thank you very much for listening, and if you do have any questions, please get in touch. Thank you.
Still to come, Radiocentre's Camilla Kamara will explore the importance of a consistent brand sound. But first, we welcome Judith Spilsbury, Head of Training and Special Projects at Radiocentre. Judith will explore how speaking to people at relevant moments can enhance advertising engagement and memorability.
Hello. Over the next few minutes, I'm hoping to give you some additional food for thought on optimising your radio campaign and specifically talk about boosting radio effects by targeting relevant moments. And that's because 9 out of 10 times when we listen to radio, we tend to be doing something else. That's what makes radio unique, and it provides an opportunity to speak to people on those occasions. But it also begs a couple of questions. Firstly, to what extent are listeners likely to engage with and recall the content of my ad? And secondly, are there ways I can make my ad work even harder through specific creative and targeting strategies? Those are questions which our study Here and Now sought to address, and that was published last year. The details are on our website, but I'm hoping to give you a flavour of some of the highlights from that study. We worked with a company called NeuroInsight, a specialist neuroscience and marketing consultancy. And they recruited 100 participants and fitted them with headsets with 24 sensors so we could measure their brain activity. And then we got them doing a series of tasks, and those tasks were typical of the sorts of tasks you might do when you're listening to radio. So, for example, cooking, making shopping lists, exercising on an exercise bike, and so on and so forth. We had radio content playing in the background, and we inserted into that radio content a series of ads, including our test ads. And then we had a test and control structure. So for each test ad, half the participants would hear that ad in a relevant context, so when they're engaged in tasks that related to the content of the ad itself, and then half of the participants heard it in a non-relevant context, so when they're engaged in tasks, but those tasks weren't remotely connected to the content of the ad. And there were some really interesting findings that came out of this study. So for example, overall, when people were engaged in tasks which related to the content of the ad, engagement increased by 23% on average. That's probably not surprising because if you think about it, when something is relevant to us, we're more likely to engage with it. However, memory encoding also went up by a similar amount. The other thing is that for 3 out of the 6 test ads, the creative was much more explicitly linked to the task in hand. And there we found that engagement and memory encoding increased even further. So engagement, the uplift in engagement increased 3 times, and the uplift in memory encoding was almost twice as high. So to illustrate this, I'm just going to show you a real-time map of one of the test ads, which was a Currys ad. And if you show the graph now, the graph shows time along the bottom, and the vertical axis measures the strength of memory response. What you're going to see as you hear the ad, there'll be 2 lines that appear. The solid red line is the brain response to the ad when they're hearing it in a relevant context, and in this instance the relevant context is exercising on an exercise bike. And the dotted red line represents the response when heard in a non-relevant context. So let's just have a look.
Currys PC World colleagues like Ahmed try out our products to give you the best advice.
Oh, I'm exhausted. Now, check my stats on the Apple Watch. Exercise time, 17 minutes.
Call that a run, Dad?
Look, I burnt 200 calories.
Wow.
Achieved an altitude of 2 meters.
Yep, you ran up the front steps.
It all counts.
Our colleagues can give you tried and tested advice and up to £250 off a new Apple product when you trade in your old tech. At Currys PC World, we help you get it right. Terms apply. See currys.co.uk for more details.
So hopefully you've noticed that specific mention of exercise triggers particularly strong memory encoding when heard in a relevant context, when people are actually exercising on the exercise bike, and that carries right through to the branding at the end. The response falls by contrast amongst those who heard the ad when they're engaged in a non-relevant task. But does this extend beyond the moment to build brand saliency? Well, we did an exit survey at the end of the test, and that demonstrated that spontaneous awareness amongst those who heard ads in a relevant context was 56% higher than when ads were heard in a non-relevant context. So yes, that does suggest the effect goes well beyond the moment to build long-term brand saliency. Just to leave you with some final thoughts, it is clear from the study that speaking to people in relevant moments can make a significant difference to boosting engagement and memorability. So whilst this isn't about replacing your core advertising strategy, it does provide an opportunity to supplement it. The other thing is that that effect can be significantly optimized by explicit creative references to the listener's activity. And all the evidence suggests that extends beyond the moment to increase overall brand saliency. I hope you found that useful, and thank you for listening.
If you have a question for Judith, post it using the hashtag #TuningIn or tweeting at Radiocentre. Our next session comes from music artist and radio presenter Fleur East, in discussion with Hits Radio's programme director Paul Gerard. Fleur will discuss how radio and brands can work together to deliver effective branded content.
Hello and welcome to Fleur East, who over the last few months has been presenting her brand new breakfast show, Hits Radio Breakfast, from her home in lockdown, but as well as that has been doing countless TV appearances on shows such as Lorraine, The One Show to name a few, releasing brand new music and even gate crashing people's Zoom meetings whilst they're at home. Hi Fleur East.
Hi!
How are you getting on in lockdown then?
Lockdown has been a life changer for so many different reasons. I couldn't comprehend doing a breakfast radio show from home in lockdown, but with amazing technology and an incredible team, we've managed to broadcast every single morning. And it's been so much fun. I've actually enjoyed being able to do a breakfast show in my pajamas, to be honest.
And I think the beauty of it is, I mean, you're doing your show from 5 different locations in a morning, but it's been great for listeners to get an insight into what I guess is just real life, really, in a normal household.
Yeah, I think it's been very relatable, particularly during this pandemic and in lockdown, because we've been working from home as well as so many others around the UK. So having them listen to us broadcast, and we set the scene that we're in our pajamas and we're broadcasting from our living rooms or our bedrooms or wherever we are, has definitely given it that authentic feel, and we've been able to connect with our listeners on a completely different level.
I think what also makes radio really special is just how trusted it is. You know, you can be there in the darkest of times, and boy, don't we know these last few months have thrown some real curveballs at the way we've lived our lives. And I think hearing you guys go through that has, you know, comforted people in a really special way. I mean, how do you feel like you've had to adapt over these last few months?
I think we've become even more authentic during lockdown because, you know, you can't fight the situation that every single person is in. So it's a unique situation affecting the whole world. And we've been able to just be real about it, be true about our experiences, even from our first experience of going to the shop, or the first time we saw someone wearing a face mask, or getting on our first Zoom with our family. And I remember actually we got a phone call from a florist during lockdown. This particular lady was preparing bouquets and flower arrangements for funerals during lockdown. And she was so upset and deeply emotional about her situation. But she called us up and told us that she was listening to us every day. And she was actually preparing the flower arrangements. And she was close to tears, actually talking about her day-to-day activities and how it affected her. But she said that we were the light in her day, and we actually helped lift her spirits and helped her get through it. And to hear something like that, and to have such an emotional connection with someone like that closely and that intimately, was really special.
And I think we found more and more people turning to radio for that, really, as an escapism from what's going on. But I think something that you've done an incredible job with more recently is actually using your platform to help change things for the better as well, and tackling issues that, you know, perhaps other media would shy away from. I think radio is very good at talking to an audience in so many different ways, whether it be making them laugh, making them cry, but also to re-educate them. And I think the work you did around Black Lives Matters is so important in that. Do you want to tell us a bit about how that came about?
So we have our feature Rap Roulette every Friday, where I get challenged to write a rap on a topic selected at random, and I'm given 24 hours to write the rap. Now, we've covered a range of topics, from the most silly things to quite serious topics. So we went from doing a rap on the British Bake Off and getting Paul Hollywood to come on the show, to then rapping about something really serious and very important, like Black Lives Matter. The raps tend to be quite lighthearted to lift everyone's mood. But what I found really special was that we could use that feature to tackle really important issues, such as this. And it actually went on to have quite a major impact. It's probably one of the most engaging pieces of content we've put out as a breakfast show.
I think we often say that radio was the original social media because it just creates a conversation, whether that be a conversation when somebody's scrolling through their phone, whilst they're listening, or whilst they're in their car and they just start talking to somebody else. And I think that power to be able to tackle anything, whether it's something as simple as a bit of showbiz news to make people laugh, have some fun with a caller on the phone, or tackle an issue that actually can make a fundamental change to the way we live, is really powerful and shows what an engagement with audiences can deliver. And that leads on to some of the amazing work that you've done with commercial brands. And I think what's really powerful is how somebody can come to us and say, look, we want to do something really different, be part of something fun and engaging, as well as, get our message out there. And it's fair to say that the audience really trust you, don't they?
Yeah, you almost build a friendship with listeners and a relationship, because ultimately they're waking up and listening to you every single day. So because we reveal so much about our lives and so much about our experiences, it's almost like they're listening to a friend every single day and they know so much about us. I remember when we did our Hits Live event and we had a commercial partnership with Openreach. And I'll never forget being tasked with going out into the arena and selecting somebody at random to win an iPhone. And at one particular event, I literally had to select someone at random out of thousands in the arena. And I managed to pick a girl whose birthday it was that day. So not only was she excited to be part of our Hits Live event and to be an avid follower of our breakfast show, but we put a massive smile on her face by giving her a prize on her actual birthday, while also promoting a brand and having a really successful partnership in that way. And so it's fun to be a part of exciting relationships like that.
I think everyone's a winner when something like that happens. And I think looking around, Bauer's portfolio at the moment, we've got some amazing brands working with our breakfast shows. Absolute's partnership with Wix, who've been sponsoring that breakfast show for years now. And it's that integration with the breakfast show, because I genuinely don't think there's anything stronger than being live and of the moment, is there? And that's something an algorithm on a streaming platform just cannot create. I mean, what do you love about live radio that would work so well for a client, perhaps?
I just love the element of jeopardy in a way. There's nothing that really compares to being on air live and you're getting the action and it's in real time and it's a direct connection with whoever's listening.
I totally agree, Fleur, and I think that's what makes radio really powerful. It's that sense of community.
Throughout the evening, along with our friends Benson's for Beds, we've been looking for new ways for you to relax.
Well, obviously, our lovely friends at Benson's for Beds have been sponsoring our show for a while now. The winner of the £2,000 with Benson's for Beds is Emma! Congratulations, John. You've won the wellness break to Iceland and £300 to revamp your bedroom at Benson's for Beds.
That's fantastic.
Oh my God! Oh, she's done it! Congratulations! The whole £2,000.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. Thank you.
Is doing a performance in the garden. We're Magic Breakfast live from Albert Square in Manchester.
Hey, it's Harriet Scott and Ronan Keating from Magic Breakfast, and we are in a Benson's for Bed store where we are finding out more about Mission Christmas by following our donated toys journey to a disadvantaged child this Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Over the years, Radiocentre's research has proven how a strong audio brand can boost the effectiveness of an ad campaign and increase the brand recognition. So we teamed up with audio producers Bounce to create Radiocentre's audio brand, including a sonic ident and brand song. The audio brand has already been used in radio ads, podcasts, online videos, and even right now at Tuning In livestream. With the ever-growing possibilities presented by an innovative audio-focused future, Radiocentre plans to make the audio brand a key part of its identity for many years to come. Up next, we have Radiocentre's Insight Manager, Camilla Camara. Camilla is responsible for delivering the research and insight function and manages Radiocentre's bespoke research. Today, she will explore the importance of a consistent audio brand.
As you will have heard earlier, audio branding is something that's very important to us as an organisation. It's something that we implement into our own advertising. But why is it so important? And how can advertisers develop their advertising to make it even more effective? Now, when we're talking about brand assets, we're talking about the non-brand name elements that trigger the brand into the memory of category buyers. So, for example, a visual brand asset might be the use of a logo or the use of a particular font, whereas an audio brand asset is referring to things like musical cues or the use of sonic triggers. We know from analysis from Ipsos that 92% of ads use distinctive visual brand assets, whereas only 8% of ads use distinctive audio brand assets. So there's very much a disparity here. We also know from Ipsos study The Power of You that distinctive audio assets make advertising much more effective, indeed more effective even than visual assets. So this presents an opportunity for advertisers to develop their audio assets and make their advertising work even harder and become even more effective. But how can brands develop effective audio brand assets? According to research from Radiocentre, consistent ads are effective ads. When we look at the top 5 creative features of effective campaigns, consistent creative ideas, musical link with TV, consistent sonic, these are all the markers of the most effective campaigns. A big reason for this is that listeners are deprived of one sense, sight, so consistent audio assets help them to understand quickly who it is they're speaking to. A great example of this is McDonald's. We often associate McDonald's with their golden arches, but we also associate them with their audio brand cues. The "I'm loving it" catchphrase and the sonic trigger that accompanies it has been around for years, and they've maintained that while still being able to keep the creative fresh and flexible and adaptable to the campaign or to the audience.
I'm loving it.
But the value of consistency extends beyond TV. So if we look at campaigns that did not include TV, consistency is still key. Consistent creative route, a consistent voice actor, consistent music, the same logic applies. Here are some examples from the retail sector. You have M&S with its consistent use of "it's not food, it's M&S food." And this was used across other advertising as well, not just for its food branding.
This is not just beef.
This is M&S Perfect Roast Beef.
Or Moonpig with its very recognisable sonic branding. So in terms of audio branding, we know that audio brand assets are more effective than visual brand assets. But only 8% of advertising uses distinctive audio brand cues. So there's very much an opportunity here for advertisers to develop their creative further. But consistency is key. Being consistent with audio brand cues across ads and across media makes advertising much more effective.
Well, that's all we have time for this morning. Thank you so much for giving up your time to spend it with us. And we hope you found it useful. If you have any further questions for me, my email address should be below this presentation now, or you can contact any of my colleagues who presented this morning via the Radiocentre website, and also pick up any of that research that's been talked about. We're happy to help in any way. We're getting used to doing these online streamed events, and we know that we haven't maybe not get them as right as we do for some of our live events, which we have a lot more experience. You will be sent a feedback form later on today. If you could fill it in and let us know what you think, anything you can tell us will be very valuable. Now, next week, we'll be looking at the travel sector. And for that, we have a very exciting speaker lined up. I hope you'll join us same time next week on Tuesday at 9:30. Until then, I hope you have a great week. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye.
That's all for Tuning In Retail. To find out more about Radiocentre's work or to get in touch with the team, head to radiocentre.org or follow Radiocentre on social media. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again at one of our real live events when it's safe to do so.